A carriage hurries along an eerie field. Suddenly a horse charges by and the coachman gets beheaded. The passenger attempts to run away but is also beheaded. Ichabod requests to do an autopsy on a body to determine the cause of death but is denied. In a courtroom he argues with a judge, insisting that instead of torturing suspects for confessions, they must look for scientific evidence and clues. The judge then sends Ichabod to Sleepy Hollow to test his methods as a detective in order to discover a killer that has decapitated 3 people. Ichabod packs and begins his journey to Sleepy Hollow. He arrives at the inn and receives a kiss from Katrina. He introduces himself as Constable Crane and informs them that he will be investigating the murders. The Van Tassels welcome him into their inn. Ichabod meets with a few men from Sleepy Hollow, including the doctor, reverend, notary, and magistrate. The men inform him that the victims' heads are all missing and that they believe the heads were taken back to hell by the Headless Horseman. Baltus Van Tassel then tells him the horseman was a mercenary that came only for his love of carnage.
He was infamous for riding his horse hard into battle, chopping off heads at full gallop.
In the winter, he was finally put to death by decapitation with his own sword. Ichabod dismisses the old tale, stating that the murderer is like any other of flesh and blood. A man in a watchtower spots the horseman. He abandons the tower and runs down a path in the woods, only to end up beheaded. Ichabod arrives at the scene, pondering why the killer takes the heads if it is not to conceal who the victim is. The men are less than thrilled by his presence and antics.
The attacker rode Masbeth down. Came back to clean the head.
Ichabod then investigates the scene with his strange devices. A funeral is held for Masbeth. Before Ichabod can leave, the victim's son offers to help bring justice to the killer. The magistrate approaches Ichabod to tell him that Masbeth is actually the 5th victim, not the 4th. Ichabod performs an autopsy on one of the victims and discovers that the woman was pregnant. While heading back to the inn, Ichabod has an unsettling feeling. He is chased through the woods with the horseman gaining on him. With a flying pumpkin technique, the horseman dismounts Ichabod and then runs off, only to reveal himself to be one of the townsmen playing a prank. In a daze, Ichabod thinks of being a young boy again, at home with his mother. He awakens suddenly and goes downstairs for a drink where he finds Katrina also awake.
My father believes tales of romance caused the brain fever that killed my mother.
Katrina reveals that the nurse who cared for her sick mother is now her stepmother. She offers Ichabod a book that belonged to her mother. Katrina takes him to her old home and notices strange markings on his hands. Upon seeing a cardinal, Katrina states she wishes to have one but would not want to cage it. Ichabod shows her a token that belonged to his mother. Ichabod approaches the magistrate, asking after the name of the father to the unborn baby that was killed, believing he may have killed the mother. The magistrate insists that it was the horseman who killed her. Suddenly a horse is heard charging through the woods. Ichabod falls over and witnesses the decapitation of the magistrate. Baltus goes to check in on Ichabod, who's in hysterics after seeing the horseman.
It's all true.
Well, of course it is. I told you. Everyone told you.
In another dream, Ichabod dances with his mother before she is taken away by some man of the church. He emerges from his room, energized and ready to find the grave of the horseman. Young Masbeth turns out to be the only one brave enough to join him. On their way, they hear eerie singing coming from a cave. Ichabod hides behind Masbeth as they enter. The woman puts down a dead cardinal and approaches them as Masbeth asks about the horseman.
That'll be him, ma'am.
The woman grabs Ichabod and tells Masbeth to stay away. She chains herself to the wall and makes a strange concoction. The woman leans over, frozen in place.
You seek the warrior bathed in blood, the Headless Horseman.
Ichabod rushes out of the cave, following the witch's directions to the horseman's grave. They see another rider on a horse. Ichabod approaches cautiously, but it turns out to be Katrina offering to help. Masbeth interrupts them to show them the tree of the dead, which is leaking blood. Ichabod hacks at the tree and pulls it apart to expose the missing heads. He finds loose soil at the base of the tree and digs up a grave. Ichabod sees that the skull is missing from the grave and believes it must be returned to the horseman. Ichabod chases the horseman through the woods but loses his trail. At a happy family home, the horseman suddenly busts through the door and decapitates the father. The mother hides her son right before the horseman enters the room. She is also decapitated. He takes both of their heads and starts to hack apart the floor. He grabs the boy as he screams. Brom rides over to help and shoots the horseman. He walks over smugly, but the horseman stands back up. As they fight, the horseman appears to be immune to all attacks. Ichabod arrives back to town and tries to help. They both run, but decide to stop at the end of the bridge. They wait patiently until the horseman can jump behind them and stab Ichabod. Brom duels again with the horseman. The doctor tends to Ichabod while Katrina prepares some crowfoot brew in a cauldron and brings it to Ichabod. He suddenly concludes that the horseman must be controlled by the person who took the skull. Katrina feeds him the crowfoot brew. A young Ichabod goes through the door where his mother was taken. He steps back onto a torture device. He wakes and tells Katrina that his mother was an innocent sentenced to death by a man of the church. After some flirting, Ichabod tells her that she has bewitched him. That morning, he is served by the Lady Van Tassel. She tells him that the servant girl, like many others, ran away in fear. Ichabod tries to fit the clues he has together to figure out who has the horseman's skull. Ichabod has an epiphany and heads to the notary, inquiring after the will of one of the victims. He discovers that the pregnant woman was newly wed to one of the first victims and had claim to a fortune, so she was killed. The one person who stood to gain the fortune after the other beneficiaries were killed was Baltus, Katrina's father. He returns to his room to find Katrina in it. She tells him that her father wishes that he goes back to New York. Masbeth then finds an occult symbol hidden under Ichabod's bed. That night, Ichabod and Masbeth follow a suspicious cloaked figure into the misty darkness. Ichabod goes ahead alone to witness Lady Van Tassel in some kinky foreplay. Speechless, he leaves and goes back to his room. He finds Katrina at her old home, burning his evidence against her father. She asks him to find another explanation, but he stands his ground on the evidence he found. Angered, Katrina leaves, cursing the day he arrived. Back in the kitchen, Lady Van Tassel tells him not to tell her husband what he saw. Baltus suddenly bursts through the door, saying the notary hung himself, and many of the town blame Ichabod. Baltus warns him that he should leave now. Lady Van Tassel carelessly gathers flowers as Baltus watches the horseman approach behind her. Everyone rushes inside the church as the horseman charges down the street. The men suddenly turn on each other, blaming one another. Katrina sits entranced on the floor. The reverend hits the doctor and Baltus shoots the reverend. Baltus runs upstairs where he is abruptly impaled and removed from the church by the horseman. Ichabod turns to see chalk in Katrina's hand and another occult symbol on the floor. Ichabod says his goodbyes to Katrina and then decides to burn her diary. Ichabod goes to leave and Masbeth demands how he could think Katrina could have done all of this. While in the carriage, Ichabod sees the body of Lady Van Tassel. He also finally looks through the book Katrina gave him, seeing that the occult symbol was really a spell for protection. He rushes back, seeing that the cut on the corpse's hand was made after death, meaning that it is not Lady Van Tassel's body. Lady Van Tassel approaches Katrina. She cuts some of her hair and burns it, summoning the headless horseman to kill Katrina. Lady Van Tassel reveals that the body was that of the poor missing servant girl. She also goes on to tell Katrina that her family was removed from their home as a young child, that she met the horseman in the woods as a child, and that she killed Katrina's mother to marry her father. She also killed her own sister, the witch in the woods. Masbeth tries to help Katrina, but Lady Van Tassel turns on him. The horseman charges through the woods as Ichabod arrives back. They rush inside of the windmill and barricade the door. They run up the stairs away from the horseman. Ichabod lights the whole windmill on fire and they make a narrow escape from the flames. The horseman emerges from the flames and remounts his steed. Katrina takes the reins as Ichabod tries to fend off the horseman. A branch hits into Ichabod and he is knocked off the carriage onto the horseman's steed. He jumps back onto the horseman, kicking him away from the carriage. The horseman gets back on his horse and continues after them. Suddenly he is standing over Ichabod. They fight again before jumping on the horses and detaching the carriage. Lady Van Tassel comes out of nowhere and shoots Ichabod. She holds Katrina for the horseman to decapitate. Ichabod tackles Lady Van Tassel and reaches for the skull. Masbeth hits Lady Van Tassel and Ichabod tosses the horseman's skull back to him. The skull reattaches itself to the horseman's body. Ichabod opens his jacket to show that Katrina's book saved him from the bullet. The horseman, now looking rather alive again, stares them down. He mounts his horse, takes Lady Van Tassel, and kisses her. Wait, that's not okay. Ichabod, Katrina, and Masbeth arrive at New York.